In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Max.
And I'm the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to WoT the Adaptation, the YouTube show that reviews adaptations from one form to another form. This week, we're continuing with what, Max?
Episode 7, The Seventh Man.
Of The Expanse.
Yep.
I'd like
That
to point out that
like
it's
lined up 7 and 7. Didn't even think about
that. But did you notice it's the 7th episode of the season, and it literally starts with blood snow?
Yeah, I did.
And a badass warrior woman.
I wasn't making the connection with that, but I did definitely notice that opening sequence. Yeah.
Yeah, I was tickled the fact that it was a badass warrior woman and it was literally blood snow in the 7th episode. I'm just like, that's too funny. If you haven't watched Wheel of Time, you won't understand. Max, what you got for us?
But the beginning of episode 7 is choice. So anyway, go on.
This episode was written by Mark Fergus, directed by Kenneth Frink, who is known for CSI Vegas, The New Charmed, Gotham, Revenge, and the old CSI Vegas.
Oh,
all right then.
I've only watched one of those, Gotham, and I stopped. So, what did everybody think of this episode?
I thought it was sort of interesting because I feel like it sort of ends up being a sort of like bridge episode between Leviathan Wakes and Caliban's War in a way, even though we already got some of Caliban's War. So it's kind of an interesting thing that's happening, but there was some good stuff in it.
I would say the beginning and the ends are great, but the middle kind of drags.
Yeah, the beginning and end are definitely the strongest. I agree there. Yeah.
I mean, there's some good stuff in the middle, but overall, I can't say I'm a big fan of this particular episode. I mean, it adapted the Bobby / Ganymede story, but totally complicated it and switched it around and just made a mess of it. But everything else it adapted was nothing. It didn't adapt from anything. There's no basis for like the rest of the episode. Just the Bobby stuff.
You're right. Bobby is the stuff that has like the direct source material. I was going to say, like, when we get into talking about like changes from the source material, it's like most of the episode was just completely added.
The mantra is, add drama or politics to further the drama.
Yeah. I mean, so I think the focus is all around like Anderson Dawes and everything happening with Anderson Dawes and like what that means for the OPA and like just everything to do with the belt, politics of the belt. So like that was all like the big focus of what's happening here. So that is interesting. I mean, important stuff.
Right.
But it did sort of come without a particular source for it.
And I'd say the strongest parts of the episode were the Bobby story and kind of indirectly the Dawes story. Like him being on screen was the strongest part of the show, this episode.
It's Jared Harris. That's going to happen.
What he did, caused some drama that was the strong focus at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I had the hardest time with as far as anything to do with Anderson Dawes in this episode is like, okay, by the end of the episode, he's done something that's like really out there and would like be a legitimate reason for people to be against him, for there to be like strong factions, pro Anderson Dawes against Anderson Dawes.
Right.
But earlier in the episode, like Holden is very hostile towards him and is like, get off the Rocinante and all that. And at that point, I mean, he was somewhat antagonistic towards Fred, but not completely. I don't know if we're supposed to think like Holden's just getting like a vibe from him that he doesn't like, which is then justified. But I did feel like Holden was like a little extreme in how he was responding to him. I mean, if it had come after what he did at the end of the episode, then sure, you know, but he hadn't done anything that crazy yet. So
I think it goes back to what Holden was telling Naomi when they were giving out, you know, relief packages about, you know, the shakedown, the belter tax that Dawes would charge every time a ship docked at Ceres.
Yeah,
you know?
I guess so. Yeah.
So I think that was put in the episode as our key thing again that he had against Dawes. But I'm sure everything else Dawes has done for Ceres, or a lot of the stuff, and just a lot of the hyperbole that probably came out of Dawes publicly, Holden is opposed to, you know, because Dawes has a habit of painting all inners the same with the same color. You know, inners are all the same.
Yeah, that's there is that, and obviously that's like the big thing that Holden's about here is that like there has to be solidarity. You can't keep focusing on we're belters, we're against the inners. It's, you know, when in the face of the other things that they're dealing with, like that's, you know, destruction. But then you see like the conflict in Naomi because, you know, I don't think she's entirely comfortable with Anderson Dawes either. But on the other hand, as she like argues against Holden's point, saying, okay, well, he did some good things with that money, you know, good things for belters, and you know, and she is somewhat sympathetic, you know, so she's sort of a little torn. She's definitely struggling with that, which is an interesting thing for her character. I like that. But
I mean, there's the point Dawes brought up of if there is peace between Earth and Mars, what does it mean for the belt?
Yeah, right. He feels like they're better off if there's not peace between Earth and Mars. And oof, that's, you know,
that's problematic.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, like someone like Holden is not going to agree with that. You know, he doesn't want war between Earth and Mars.
And you know, both Fred and Holden were like, you know, we had to get the missiles back. Dawes didn't really say whether he was for or against it.
He didn't oppose that.
He came out in favor of it.
He was like, yes, we give the missiles back. So like, I don't know if that was just to like mollify Fred a little bit or that faction.
Well, I say sorta because he kind of made it sound like he was siding with him that yes, we should, you know, but then, you know, his whole thing about stealing the scientist was to take away Fred's pawn for him to actually not give away the nukes back.
Yeah.
Because he said, like, what was your... He was free to give them up because you have another thing up your sleeve. Now, you get rid of that thing up your sleeve, you may not actually think about giving those back as easily.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't think of it that way. I thought he was taking it to have an advantage over that he's now the one who's got the scientist who knows about the protomolecule. I don't think it was all about... I don't think it had anything to do with trying to keep Fred from handing over the missiles, because Dawes flat out said keeping the missiles was an act of war. His exact words, act of war. So he was all in favor of giving the missiles back, I think. I don't think there was any...
I think he was more in favor of not giving it to the other captains, if you want, the other factions.
Yeah, I could see that.
Then it was about...
That was the worst idea anybody ever came up with. Is like, oh yeah, let's just divide up these missiles among the different factions in the belt. That's great, brilliant idea.
That was Diogo's buddy Stas.
Yeah,
that's literally like the worst idea ever, is to split those up
completely.
But also, he had talked to I can never remember her name, the second in command of Tycho,
Kamina, drummer.
Yeah. And
he hasn't even have that name in the show yet, I don't think, but it is drummer. But I don't, in like the X-ray for the episode, I checked and it just says like Fred Johnson's second in command or something like that. Like
they give a name to her this episode, but
he calls her something, but I think it's like a belter nickname or something.
It means star. It means star. I looked it up. Sitara is what it is. Sitara. But he also calls Naomi that. He calls Naomi that too. It's
belter slang or something for, I don't know exactly what, but because I noticed that too. I was like, oh, what did he call her? And that was what made me check the X-ray. I'm like, does she have some like different name now? And I'm like, no, she doesn't even have a name. So
he called her that. Then he said, no, you call me like drummer or something, or whatever it was. But
You don't have
regardless,
the right
like
to call me that since whatever.
yeah.
Okay.
But regardless,
Anyway,
like he had talked to her, and I'm pretty sure during that phrase he was trying to weasel out information regarding what he had up his sleeve. And I want to say either between him talking to Holden, her, Naomi, he had alluded to the idea that the reason Fred gave up the nuke so easily is he had something up his sleeve.
Yeah, he did keep talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see that's how Dawes looks at it. I don't know that Fred necessarily was looking at it the same way.
Well,
but we're still talking about Dawes.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I think Dawes is wrong. Is what I'm saying.
I think there's a legitimate point to what Max is saying, which is that, maybe, again, I'm not sure about like what Dawes thinks, to be honest, by the end of this episode, like what he really thinks. But I think there's a point there of like him saying, oh yeah, we should just give these missiles back because keeping them would be an act of war. Did he really mean that? Or was he saying that to like he didn't want to come out like fully against Fred. He didn't want to come out like fully radical. Was he trying to like sort of have this like middle ground while he's trying to figure out what Fred's real, ace in the hole is. And once he'd figured that out, then he acts in a way that isn't necessarily consistent with what he'd said before. So, I mean, it's hard. You can't draw a direct connection and say like, okay, what he thinks or what he doesn't think. But
from Dawes' perspective is like, if he takes the thing that he thinks Fred has more power with, that nukes are nothing comparatively.
Yeah.
And then he takes it, and then Fred's like, oh, I don't have this thing, but I have these nukes. Maybe I should keep them. Now Fred's the one that, didn't go with his word.
Yeah. I mean,
I his promise to give them back. While Dawes is like, we should give them back. For a political move, like, I see that kind of where he's aiming.
I think that you have a point. Like, it could be that he's thinking along those lines. It's hard to say because I don't think Dawes is very straightforward at all.
Anderson Dawes is the guy who can smile at you, shake your hand while sticking a knife into your heart, all in one motion. And not break face. He did that to both Dawes or to both Fred and Holden.
And you apologize when he does it.
Yeah.
You're actually, Glenn, you're making me reevaluate my complaint about Holden and how he reacted to him for a minute, because you're right. And if you're right, and I think that that's a fair assessment, he's like Holden's polar opposite. And if Holden just senses that, he doesn't even have to have like a specific reason that if he just gets the sense that this guy is like his antithesis, maybe that's why he just rubs him the wrong way because of that. Yeah. So you're making me reevaluate that complaint, actually.
Because I don't know. I'm a big fan of Jared Harris's performance as Anderson Dawes, but this is the performance that just, not so much the performance, but everything Dawes did this episode just really irked me. And that's to put it mildly. I don't think I've ever been so upset with Anderson Dawes' actions. I know I will be in a couple seasons but this one here is the first time that I was truly pissed off.
He hasn't done that much up until now. I mean, this was like his first like major episode where he's the one driving everything in this episode.
Yeah. More so than any of the times he dealt with Millard. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't really get the sense of like how, I mean, you kind of like know he's a player, in the OPA action and everything, like from his interactions with Miller, but like here's where you actually like see him, in action, which you don't see it earlier. So.
He's dangerous.
Yes.
He pretends to be reasonable, but I think he's pretty freaking radical, at heart. And
did they ever explain his scars?
No, I was wondering about that too, right? Because he has scars that are sort of like an OPA tattoo. But
yeah, he did. Last season he was talking to somebody. They had a janky spacesuit, and there were contacts that burned the throat, and he pointed it out. I don't remember what episode he was talking to somebody about, he talked to somebody about, a suit having had contacts with metal, electricity, and it would electric burns around the neck.
Okay. Oh.
Because they almost kind of remind me of, how do I put it? In some gangs, if you have tattoos, if you get kicked out, they burn them off.
Ooh.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of what that reminds me of. But obviously, he's still in the OPA.
Oh, yeah. He's not been kicked out.
Yeah.
No.
Unless it's like to show how badass he is the.
I was thinking of it as like a very like OG, like kind of like, he got it the hard way or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but sort of symbolic, but.
Well, it's like the guys that get the, the ink pen tattoos and they have like the knife tattoos with a hammer.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. As opposed to like getting it like a sort of nice and easy way, like Diogo did. It's like.
Yeah. I want one of those machines. Those are easy to do tattoos. I don't even think you feel it.
No, it doesn't look like it.
It's like, wow.
Takes no time at all. You just slap it on there.
It's the same thing they use to paint walls or paint the hull of the boat.
No wonder so many belters have tattoos when you got that kind of deal. It's easy.
Don't have to worry about cleanliness.
That was actually kind of a thought I had while watching the show with like all their resource scarcity. They have a lot of time to put in their hands for tattoos.
Yeah, they do.
Well, now we know why. It doesn't take that much time, I guess.
I just wish there was a guide to what the different tattoos are supposed to mean, because I get the feeling that there's a meaning behind each tattoo.
All of them, right? And like, I was wondering that too, because like you have like a shot of like drummer's neck tattoo, and it's different, So like, what's up with that? Like, what's her tattoo about?
Right?
Are they stars?
I don't know.
Sitaras?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I bookmarked the page with all the belter paths.
Oh, did you? That's
so smart. I looked up when there's a word. I look it up. I've been looking them up.
I don't do that enough. Like, I feel like I'm like slowly getting like a small number of like phrases and things that I recognize and know what it means, but it's a small number compared to how many they use in the show. Yeah. So I was also gonna like comment on, so we talked a lot about Anderson Dawes and like what that's a huge focus of the episode, like what those additions did in terms of the episode. We can also talk about the Amos scenes. I think that because that's definitely something that's been added. I mean, it was already there, it had already been introduced, his his sort of like feelings about like Cortazar and like what he's got going on. And I do think, I'm always kind of interested in those scenes, Amos and Cortazar, just because you sort of, there's this question somewhat that's introduced where, is Amos thinking that he I think recognizes that he has, some level of humanity, some level of empathy that Cortazar doesn't have. He has less than the average person, but he has more than Cortazar. And then the question is Amos thinking, do I want to have less? Do I want to go all the way like Cortazar? Because that bit that he has is painful sometimes, right? Like when he realizes that he like scared this kid and his mom, and he feels terrible about that. So that bothers him. So is he thinking about going all the way, or is he thinking about how to like not scare people in the first place, like being more human, more empathetic, so that he wasn't.
I think
scaring.
that was his first thought the first time when we see it in the previews, about when the doctor was explaining to him about the magnetic resonance thing that they did to him. The first thing Amos said was, "Is it reversible?"
Right, as if could he be could something be done to him to give him a more a more normal level of empathy? So I think that was his first thought. But I think in this episode, I still think he's thinking the same thing. But I think you could look at it and read it and wonder is he thinking about going all the way towards Cortazar? Cortazar thinks that's what he wants, right? And he's like, yeah, I can help you. I can, you're going to feel great, basically. And he thinks that's what Amos is thinking. And it's not entirely clear, like, which way Amos wants to go with it in this episode. So at least raises that question. Is he thinking about going full Cortazar, or is he still thinking about going, back towards empathy?
I think part of why he went to go talk and see Cortazar is to feel better about what he does have.
Yes.
Perhaps. To look at Cortazar, it's a situation of like, all right, things are going really bad right now for me, so I'm going to go watch somebody else who's got it even worse.
Yeah.
To make me feel better about what I do have going for me, type attitude. Is that was kind of the impression I got.
Yeah, and it could be. Yeah, there's something that draws him there because he somewhat relates. But I think making the distinction between himself and Cortazar too is also important.
When Cortazar was talking about like what the procedure did and how it gave him, what was it, a good feeling all the time instead of a bad. It's like
a raging storm.
If that could work for like anxiety, depression, like people would hit that up so fast.
That's true.
Especially if they like didn't touch the empathy side, touch that stuff. Like that'd be so popular.
Yeah. If there was some sort of thing you could do to like, rewire your brain chemistry so those things were just gone. Yeah.
They have been able to manipulate the way people feel and react and behave through magnets, through the exact process that they were talking about. This was not an entirely science fictional concept. This is based on real science that we are already doing.
Yeah.
Maybe not to the level of what they did to Cortazar, but it's there.
But seeing something like this makes that like a very cautionary thing of like, well,
what's
you got
the
to be
price to pay?
Monkeying around with people's brains and magnets because you may end up with that guy.
Yeah. Well, it's like if the price to pay to like cure anxiety, depression is you lose all empathy.
Right. And you're fine with just like wiping out, entire populations of people because whatever.
Let's see, they did that deliberately. That was a deliberate effect with them.
Oh,
and
right.
I think it was even done to Dresden. I would hope that it was done to Dresden. The only person in that chain of command that didn't have it done to him, I'm pretty sure, was Jules Pierre Mao.
I don't think anything's been done to Jules Pierre Mao. He
just has no empathy.
Right.
What was it? Affluenza?
Yes. Yeah.
100%.
I also think, when you look at someone like Jules Pierre Mao, like he just removes himself far enough from the actual reality of it that he doesn't have to face it. He's not the person who's directly manipulating. He's like so many levels removed. And that just illustrates that if you give yourself enough distance from anything that you're doing and you have the right personality, he may be someone that couldn't, I don't know, directly do some of the things that, let's say, like Dresden did or Cortazar.
Dresden came directly to him. And he gave direct orders directly to Dresden.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I'm just saying he's not staring it in the face. Like he's not looking at Eros, right? I mean, he wasn't one of the people who was directly like, okay, let's throw these people in the incubators. And, he's many levels removed from that. I'm not saying he's not giving the orders. I'm not saying he's not responsible. Right. I'm saying that the psychology is that if you give yourself that many layers of distance, not having to look at what you're doing, you may, some people may be capable of, more horrendous things without, because I'm not sure that they portray Jules Pierre Mao as someone who doesn't have any feeling, right? I mean, he does for some people.
For Julie, when Julie passed away.
For Julie.
He didn't show a lot of emotion, but he showed some.
Yeah, I'm just saying, they don't really portray him as like a complete like sociopath or whatever, but I think he's the guy who's just so far removed from everything, that he can just ignore it.
Speaking of monsters,
yes,
there's a whole nother storyline in this episode. Roberta, Don't call me Roberta, Bobby.
Yeah, don't.
I'm glad that they have the Bobby Draper storyline in here, but I don't recognize it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, talk about that. Like, what were your issues with the changes to Bobby's story?
I didn't like the fact that I spoke last week about they shortchanged the whole thing with, the monster killing everybody.
We don't see a lot of it. Yeah.
One, they blew Bobby's armor to pieces. The exact thing in the book she was afraid they would have done, and they didn't do in the book. It's like every step in the book, the opposite is what the show does. In the show, it's it's real late that we get anything about the seventh man, the seventh person running. She's already gone. And they never. I don't remember in the book them ever saying the Martians were going to take the blame for starting the conflict.
No, that seems different. Yeah,
that's opposite of what the book. I don't mind the Purple Heart thing, although I think it's weird that Mars gives the Purple Heart when the only place in the world that gives the Purple Heart is the United States. And
they're Texans,
I couldn't actually find the names of any awards that other countries give simply for being wounded in action. They were always for more than that. I could be wrong, but my Google foo failed me finding anything that was an exact equivalent to the Purple Heart. So I thought that was kind of weird. They did it because it's for an American audience, and the American audience is going to know what the hell a Purple Heart is.
Yeah.
If you don't know what a Purple Heart is, look it up, but you should.
I mean, I think they just needed a thing, right? The idea being, okay, we're going to try to mollify you, right? We want you to do something for us, so we're going to give you this honor first, and hope that like butters you up enough that you're going to cooperate. So I mean, I think that's the point, and then you just picked the thing that made.
In the book, Thorson has the Force wake her up from being unconscious, or nearly unconscious, and in the book, Thorson's the one that says give her a sedative. So another reversal of what the book does. It's all these little points, and I lost the notes that I had. I didn't save it. I found like 5 or 6 other little tiny things that just they did the exact opposite in the show from what they did in the book, and it was just like I said, it seems more complicated. The storyline they're telling now, they don't have anything about her armor camera picking up the monster, which that put a kibosh on the whole don't talk about this or you're crazy but Gunny type attitude that they're taking with her. And that should stop almost right away in the book.
The only thing I would say is they told her the camera didn't work. Right. That could easily be a lie to the audience of
she asked about it.
Yeah.
But we don't.
It's not the first time they lied to her on that ship.
Nope.
No.
So even though they said the camera was broken, does not mean it actually was.
Right. I mean, I think it's all very deliberate. I mean, you may like it or not like it, but I do think all of these changes are pretty deliberate. Even going back to what we talked about last week of them not showing much of the seventh man, because it introduces that plausibility for her in this episode to have to retrieve that memory, right? Like it's something that's somewhat suppressed by the trauma or what have you, but that she is not entirely clear in her own memory. It creates that room for doubt. For once she becomes clear, she becomes clear in this episode of what happened, but they want her to lie, and it gives them ammunition against her, right? That she wasn't sure at first, she didn't remember everything at first, and that creates that tension of doubt over what happened. I mean, we as the audience, we did see that, so we know that there was something there. I don't think it's there to create doubt with the audience whether or not to believe her, but it creates that like tension for her as a character and like how she's going to deal with all of it. So I think it's all deliberate. I think those changes are.
they're doing what the story in the book would have done. They're just doing it differently. And
Yeah.
because I think the book story would have worked perfectly fine and have taken up less time. Maybe they had to expand time. Maybe that's what they wanted, was to fill up more space. But I don't know.
I was going to mention.
Go ahead.
Well, so why would you want to expand time? The only reason I can think really is that because, again, you didn't have the like year-long gap or whatever it was between books, and because and then also you want to deal with the Ganymede stuff, and maybe they needed like a space of an episode, right? Okay, so the Ganymede incident, happened at the end of episode 6. If at the beginning of episode 7 you're already dealing with like the full crisis with Prax, and we haven't gotten there yet, but like maybe that's too soon. Maybe you need this 1 episode gap before you're dealing with like Ganymede is in full crisis, and that's why they're doing this episode the way that they did. I mean, just I don't know. It's like there's a lot of space in the first part of Caliban's War, where a lot of the, there's like time, and it's hard, I think, to create that sense of time in the show from one episode to the very next episode. So I don't know, just maybe.
So I was going to mention that the reason they didn't show much of the creature left episode is probably budgetary, because we're going to see a lot more of it in a few episodes.
Well, that's true too. Yeah.
And like I said, budget wise, I think that's why we just didn't see it in action like we normally would have.
Yeah.
Same with Bobby's suit.
Yeah.
How to put it? Budget wise, we don't really want to see much of it from here. Blowing it up is one thing, and I believe we do see it again like next season.
No. Yes.
I don't remember. Well,
I think it's next season we see it.
It's repaired.
Yeah. I don't remember what season.
It goes to Earth with her, because spoiler, it did record the monster.
Yeah.
And they do have it, and they do use it to show to the Earthers. Earthlings, Earthers, which one?
Earthers, they say. They say Earthers.
I like Earthling, but Earthling sounds kind of fun. Take me to your
It's confirmed
Earthling.
he's a Martian. We call him Marvin behind the scene.
Shh. That's my nickname. Don't tell anybody. No, it's not. It's never been a nickname. But yeah, we do see her armor again. We saw it again later in this episode. She was looking at it. Looked like it needs to be repaired, but
right.
Which is
she's gonna sit there and repair it.
Yeah,
if she can.
Of course, in the book, they say when they blow your armor like that, it's irreparable. It destroys the armor. So maybe she gets new armor, which is hard considering her size and shape, as it says in the book. She's not shaped right, like for the normal Marine armor. She's got to get a special set.
Yeah.
I still want
considering she just casually broke her own suit's armor when she arm wrestled it, I think she's got this handled.
Yeah.
I love that power armor. It just looks so cool.
I mentioned earlier like, we know the Martians have like this Texan accent.
Yeah.
And you're mentioning the Purple Heart. And it's like, what's more American than this power armor suit they have developed with the guns on the arms?
It was a small number of Texans in the Mariner Valley, and it's specifically the Mariner Valley, where the Chinese and the South Asians that moved there picked up the drawl from the Texans, because apparently it's contagious.
Yeah. So then the Mariner Valley is all Texas drawl.
It wouldn't surprise me if they have
not from the Mariner Valley.
It wouldn't surprise me if they have very loose gun laws on Mars.
Yeah.
Just be like Texas.
Well, no, because one stray bullet puncturing a dome, and everybody's in trouble.
That's true.
Well, you say that, but
speaking of Texans or Martians from the Mariner Valley, who don't you see on my wallpaper? I positioned myself perfectly.
He's also barely in this episode, but
Yeah.
I will say, because I missed last week's episode, I love that scene with Holden and Amos.
Yeah, we did talk about that. That was good. Yeah.
I just loved Holden's face when Amos basically said that, she was his sister, and yes, he would screw her. And he's just like, you'd screw your sister?
Yep.
Just the look of confusion and disgust is just hilarious. And then there's the wet willy.
What's the problem?
And then the wet willy
was great. The wet willy was great.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Was there anything else we wanted to talk about for changes in this episode?
No, I've actually started going into the costumes. We've already started.
Yeah. Well, you're right. All right. So anything, we want to talk about in terms of, visuals, costumes, CG, anything? For me, it was it
looked good.
For me, it was like the very beginning sequence, like what you mentioned, the calling the blood snow, like that whole bit where, there's very little sound and everything's like slow motion as Bobby's kind of like, coming back to, and
the medic running towards her with these big glowing eyes on either side of its head was just like, I understand why she was bringing her gun around, because like it looked like the monster coming back after her.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I thought the visuals were really nicely done in that opening sequence. For me, that was my favorite bit.
That blood snowflake.
That blood snowflake, just following that.
I still wonder if that would be possible in space. I have my doubts.
I don't know.
Sure.
I have my doubts because of the vacuum nature and blood and all that other fun stuff. Whether it can actually turn into a snowflake is my question.
I think probably, because it deals with the properties of, it's mostly water, and deals with the properties of how water freezes into that hexagonal, crystal structure. So I think it probably would.
I don't know, but rule of cool, so it's fine.
Yes,
exactly. I have my doubts, but it's still cool.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty accurate. Now, as to what they did after they blew her armor, what they covered her with to put her back within an atmosphere, that I wish we had seen, because
I assume she had a pressurized suit within the suit.
They blew the pressurized suit off of her. The armor's the pressurized. Underneath is just that bodysuit that they're always wearing.
Yeah, I assume that bodysuit's still pressurized to a point. Because she had like a full face mask on when they took it off.
That blew off. With the helmet, with the armor.
I'm pretty sure she had a full face mask on.
Her mask was cracked. She was venting atmosphere out of her mask.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure she still had the mask on when they blew the suit.
I don't know.
Because it looked like a shell over a suit.
Okay. I don't know. I got the impression that the helmet went with the suit, was my impression. Now, you can survive, they believe, for short amounts of time in a vacuum. Like what that guy did, Diogo's uncle did in season 1, where he opened his mask.
Oh, yeah.
That thing out and then closed the mask. You can totally do that. You're going to want to do it with your eyes closed so your eyes don't freeze or burn. But
that is a thing that they return to in this show. So clearly it's a thing that they support.
Yes. I mean, Battlestar Galactica did it in one episode. But they were only exposed to atmosphere, to vacuum, for maybe 12 seconds. And if you count the entire time it takes them to travel and then close the door and fill it with air. But yeah, spoiler, we do get a scene where somebody does a big long jump, a nice little space jump with no vacuum suit and environment suit. And I'm just like,
yep, that happened. There were some consequences, but it happened.
Could work. Theoretically, it could work, but especially with, some kind of oxygen supplement needle.
I mean, it's better than, I think, like more of the, like some of the crazy depictions that have been shown in other like sci-fi,
like Total Recall on Mars, the eyes popping out.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. No,
bit much.
Yeah. Though after a certain amount of time, your blood does start to boil.
So, anything else in that category we wanted to comment on?
CG looked great.
Okay.
The ships and Tycho Station, I thought it looked all good.
Always good, yeah. Any dialogue we want to comment on from this episode?
Good and bad. Don't get distracted by it. It'll just confuse you. From from Anderson Dawes to Holden. I'm like, ooh, what a good, don't get distracted by that. It will just confuse you. That tells you everything you need to know about Anderson Dawes.
And again, very much opposite worldview of Holden.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Whatever's necessary, I'm assuming, or whatever you feel like doing. I'm assuming he's not total for himself and whatever he feels like doing. I think he means it more along the lines of what you need to do, what needs to be done, whether it's good or bad.
I think it's just like very like moral relativism, right? Like there is no fixed good or bad or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, that says everything you need to know about Anderson Dawes, really.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Max, any dialogue that you liked?
Scenes with Amos talking about the kid to what's his face. That stood out pretty well. Let's see. Holden's dialogue was just for most part. Even like his discussion with Naomi is just kind of he wasn't really the focus here. Bobby's dialogue during like all the kind of interviews or interrogations were fantastic, I thought.
Yeah. I'll tell you the other really well-written scene. I don't know, didn't write down any of the dialogue or remember any of it, but that OPA meeting had some really good dialogue going on, from everybody.
Yeah, that was a complex scene. So actually, go ahead.
Some of those extras have been extras in other OPA faction meetings.
Yeah, scenes, nice for that.
Which I'm glad to spot.
Yeah.
We didn't really see much of Alice Lara this episode. Like there's that, I want to say like that one scene.
One scene. That's it. One scene of Avasarala this episode. Yeah, that was noteworthy. But yeah.
And it's got that guy with that punchable face. Figure out which one that is.
Right?
Aaron Wright.
Sean Doyle is Aaron Wright.
Yeah.
Either of them really.
Both roles I've seen him play, I want to punch them in the face. And I don't like punching people, but Sean Doyle's characters really need being punched in the face.
He knows how to do that. Yeah.
He's good at it. So
I like the guy that played Malfoy and Joffrey.
The two guys.
Yeah.
I can't think of their names
guys,
now.
But whatever.
Yeah, I can't think of their names now.
I don't know either. I can't.
Yeah. Oh, that's bad because I used to know their names off the top of my head.
You know, it's bad when they go in other movies as the actor, they're as themselves because they reference the movie they were in.
Yeah.
Or the show.
No, I know the guy who played Joffrey quit acting.
Yeah, he did.
He wants,
he was young.
Wants to be an academic.
Yeah, he was very young when he got that role. And that was it. I mean, I can't say I blame him. I'm sure, it's not for everybody. The kind of attention you might get doing something like that is.
He probably didn't want to get typecast like Sean Bean.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, he may not have, and that might have been tough, but.
Yeah. He does still do some community type theater type stuff. I saw like a discussion he did at the Oxford Student Union. I used to be subscribed to that YouTube channel. They would have some really interesting discussions and interviews. But they interviewed him and they had a talk with him, and him and some friends have a small little, community theater thing they do, but he's not professionally acting anymore.
That's good.
He's going to be an academic.
Do it for fun and not have to deal with the, insanity, then good. So let's so talking about the big OPA scene, I had that as one of my more memorable scenes in the episode, I think.
It was a memorable scene.
It's a tough, I think, balance to get, to have a big group scene like that, to have like a few different major players with a bunch of like background people. I feel like that's a tough thing to kind of pull off, to like the dynamics of it, but that was pretty well done, I thought.
The ending of that scene when he's talking to Fred Holden, and Fred's like, "You didn't really help me here," piping in.
Yeah.
You helped the OPA more.
Yeah.
He never really learns his lesson that sometimes shutting up will do a lot better and let, politicians handle it.
Very hard lesson for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I can sympathize with Holden on that one because I've got a bit of a mouth on me at times too, and I know I've gotten myself into trouble with things I've said. So
yeah.
I understand. I can sympathize with that aspect of Holden. I see a little bit of myself in Holden.
Yeah. And I think it's fair that it's not an easy lesson for him to learn because you kind of gather that it's just kind of so core to who he is. So that's not an easy thing to change.
I mean, Holden is an idealist. I'm pretty much an idealist. I've been called an idealist many times. So, although I'd like to be more like Fred Johnson. Not early Fred Johnson, but like Fred Johnson once the books start. I don't want to be the butcher of Anderson Station. I want to be the guy who runs Tycho Station.
Yeah, because I think the problem with idealism is when there's no sense of compromise to it, right? When you can't really deal with nuance, right? There's no like shades to anything. It's just like stark, right, wrong, and most things aren't like that, I think that's the tough thing. It's like I wouldn't say I'm not like an Anderson Dawes where I'm like, oh, there is no good or bad, or it does, it's completely irrelevant or it doesn't matter. But I'm also very much not a black and white thinker. And that kind of like it's a fairly extreme way of looking at things. And Holden is kind of like that. And he, again, being an idealist, there's a lot of good things that go along with it. But not being able to see nuance, not being able to compromise, that's
where him and I differ. That's where him and I differ. Totally.
Anyway, what other scenes do you want to talk about?
My favorite scene, the one I went back and forth between this scene and the OPA gathering. Mm-hmm. I finally went with Anderson Dawes on the Rocinante with Holden and Naomi.
Okay.
It just the interplay. I mean, my favorite line of the episode, good, bad, don't get distracted by that, came from that scene. I really enjoyed that scene a lot. Maybe not as memorable as the OPA meeting, but I enjoyed it more. I thought points were made on both sides, especially on Holden's side, but yeah, I just like that one.
Okay. What about you, Max?
It's similar to dialogue. The one that stood out for me for Amos is when he's handing out the food. And the kid gets scared of him and he's like on his butt and like, what the hell? And the other part is with Bobby in the interrogation.
Yeah.
I think about the time she pops the pill is about the scene that stood out.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I almost picked that because I think that there's definitely an argument to be made there because I think she's actually probably the strongest thing about the episode overall. But it's just that it's not limited to one single scene, it's kind of spread out over the episode. But that was a pretty good scene for her. Yeah.
Yeah, she was pretty good in this one.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm going to go first on this one. She's my number one actor for the episode.
Yeah.
And I went all Marsons because I always end up naming two or three. And both the others that I want to give shout outs to, I love seeing Peter Outerbridge, who's been in so many different shows and movies. I'm sure if you looked at his IMDb, you'd find at least two things on there that you've seen. I liked him as Captain Martins, and then Clay Bennett as Lieutenant Commander Thorson. I really like too. I like the performances on the Martian side a lot, and that's so I don't want that, but definitely Frankie Adams as Bobby Draper. I mean, Frankie was born to play this part.
Absolutely.
I mean, she's a bit young right now to be playing a gunnery sergeant. She's only like 23 at this point, and you usually don't reach gunnery sergeant until you're like 27, 28. I think in the US where the youngest is 28.
So do you want Brienne of Tarth playing her?
Bring up what?
Brienne of Tarth.
Oh,
Gwendolyn Christie.
She's not right. Big.
Oh, she's size-wise, she's right, but she's
it's not.
She doesn't have the like, the right.
The self-specific aspect.
Mm-hmm. No, I think Frankie Adams was perfect. I had her for sure as my my choice for this question because I thought, she had a lot to do in this episode, and it was very compelling. And as you said, I think she's born to play this role. And in fact, they talked about like casting for Bobby and how difficult it was because they wanted a very tall, somewhat Samoan looking, woman. And that's not that easy to find. So
who can act?
Who can act, right?
Right.
So it was very hard to find Frankie. But then they did, and they were like, oh yeah, she's right.
I really like that this episode she was able to show more than just like roid rage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because to this point, it's pretty much all we got out of her.
Right. We're like establishing like who she is, at least when in Marine mode, right? Like she's always been in Marine mode. And that's been broken down traumatically in this episode, and she's trying to deal with it. And it's really awesome. Not horrible for her, for the character, but like to see someone just completely thrown out of their usual persona and having to deal with, so many things. And she did a beautiful job.
I will say, having read the book, Alice Lara's interaction with Bobby later on, she really does in the book exemplify Marines, like the stereotypical jarhead Marine.
Yeah.
And some of those interactions were great. And I kind of look forward to see if we get the same from her in this.
Mm-hmm. Max, did you have any other actors you wanted to mention?
Well, obviously Bobby was the first one. After that, we have Jared Harris, Anderson Dawes.
Yeah, definitely worth mentioning Jared Harris. Yeah.
A little bit of Amos. And for the, non-human type character, I don't know if I would say it was good acting, but Anderson Dawes' nipples were still very distracting this episode.
You realize I'm going to have to do a shot of the nipples again. You had to mention.
I don't know why.
Are you
what's
Kevin
going on
Angus?
with
that? I know.
You're like Kevin Angus. He's got that obsession with Trolloc nipples.
Trolloc nipples.
They're always sticking out. It's so distracting, man.
Okay, I'm just gonna say I don't notice his nipples. I've not paid any attention to it at all.
Now go back through, and once you see them, you can't stop. Yeah.
You're once not you see it, I not see them.
It's probably one of those things that now,
well, it's like in the first season, he was always wearing tank tops, so they stood out even more. And now he's wearing an actual shirt, and they still stick out.
It makes me think it's chilly on set.
It has to be, or something. Maybe it's like a pre-ritual for him before he goes on stage.
All right. I'm gonna stop. All right. Cool. All right. So Jared Harris's nipples get a little shout out, and we can move on now.
Oops, I accidentally muted Max, and I can't unmute him.
Oh no. There he is.
There he is.
Okay. All right. So are we ready to talk about themes? All right. So let's get into the themes of this episode. I don't have a ton to say, maybe a little bit. But I know Glenn likes to go last. So I'll just give Max a chance to jump in here first. So any things?
The biggest one I kind of stood out to me had to do with trust and the lack of it.
Yeah.
Or how much do you really trust the people you trust?
Right.
That's exactly what I went with.
And I had kind of similar thoughts along those lines of like, also just like withholding information, like, deception of various kinds, was pretty prevalent throughout, just that like, there's lots of like communication breakdowns and deliberate like suppressing of information, all kinds of things like along those lines too.
Yeah, trust was a really big theme with everything with Bobby. with Bobby and Thorson and Bobby and Martins, trying to establish a level of trust with her trying to trust them, and her trusting herself, her own memories.
Yeah.
Then you got Holden not trusting anyone with either Cortazar or the protomolecule. I mean, the protomolecule wasn't directly referenced the fact that they've got it, but we all still know that they've got a rocket with the protomolecule. Holden thinks it went into the sun, but that was just a simulation because he wasn't smart enough to look at the screen and notice simulation was running.
Yeah, but at least he genuinely, when he's saying like, I think we took care of it, he does believe that,
Right.
And meanwhile, Naomi's over there with that side-eye expression. Like,
Naomi's breaking his trust on that. He trusted that it was destroyed.
Right. I mean, that's not out in the open yet, but it's undercurrent. Right. Yeah.
He was so distrustful of anyone having Cortazar that he was going down to commit premeditated murder when he discovered Cortazar was missing. That's the only reason he grabbed the gun just in the middle of the night to go to see Cortazar.
Yeah.
Was to kill him.
Well, that actually, I'm surprised we didn't talk about this before because I meant to bring it up. Exactly why does he go there? Like, what is it? Is he having like weird premonitions like in this whole episode or something? Because like,
no.
or is it just that he doesn't trust anybody, so he's just like very paranoid and on edge? Like, what makes him go see?
It goes back to that scene with him and Fred talking, and Fred saying that the protomolecule is talking to Cortazar. He says there's another sample out there. There's more of it out there.
Yeah.
Which, we know automatically the one place when we actually know two places because we've seen the monster, and the monster is pretty obviously protomolecule based.
Yeah.
So we know as viewers that there's two samples out there at least. One with whoever released the monster. We don't know that storyline yet for enough, so I'm not going to say. And then with the sample that Naomi kept hidden in that asteroid mining location. So, but...
And, they keep saying, like, Eros was destroyed going into Venus, and of course, that's questionable assumption as well.
I don't know how much the people out in the belt area know about what's going on Venus, but the people in Earth area, at least the people who are paying attention, they know something's going on down on Venus.
I mean, that so far, I think in the show, we don't know anything.
Yeah.
But, it's a matter of time, right? I mean, I think they're just playing it as at this point in time, there's nothing evidently happening on Venus.
I thought it was mentioned.
No,
I need to stop going back and forth because I'll listen to the books and then I'll watch the episode.
No, I don't think so.
And then listen to the book and then...
There's nothing in the show. There's nothing to suggest anything is happening on Venus, but I think it's just a matter of time, which in the show is not that much time. Not that much time has passed since Eros went into Venus. So
in the books, it went like straight to the hexagon as soon as it crashed.
Right.
Whereas in the show, it just exploded. And that's all I've seen so far.
Right. So they think it's gone based on that, but again, give it some time.
Yeah, it's just. But I'm still weirded out about the fact that Holden was about to commit premeditated murder. There's no other way to describe what he was doing.
I think it is consistent with the Holden that we see at the beginning of Caliban's War.
Okay.
In the beginning of Caliban's War, Holden is notably different than he was in Leviathan Wakes. Immediately post Eros, Holden is changed, is different than he was, and it's commented on, especially by Naomi, a lot in the beginning of Caliban's War, and I think that is consistent with that.
And that's why I wish we had gotten some of them doing their pirate hunting, because that's where a lot of his change came. That year of hunting pirates and having to blow ships out of the sky, doing exactly what he refused to do in the Navy that got him in trouble. if you read the Origins. You know,
I mean, I just think, it's a sort of a time issue, but at the same time, like, I think it's true that like there's bits of that Holden and Naomi conflict in this episode. It's just maybe we need a bit more. It needs to be explored a bit more, you know, to really get to that side of like what is going on with Holden right now. Because I don't think we're getting enough internal Holden moments to really understand that. So I'm saying it's consistent with the beginning of Caliban's War, but I don't think we're like exploring the why of it in the show at this point. Like, you know, we can say, okay, well, we just saw, you know, what he went through on Eros. We know that Miller has had some influence on him. But I think we need a little bit more like internal stuff from Holden to explore that side of it. But
yeah, we've been seeing a lot of angry Holden. He was even angry and talked angry to Naomi in this episode. Like right after Dawes left the ship, Holden gets up right up in Naomi's face and says,
it's
and then storms off. Like he's in a pissy fit, and I'm like, Jim, settle down, man.
Yeah, and I think what we're not seeing is the panic. I mean, that may come later, right? Because right now he dealt with the protomolecule, it's gone, so I have no real reason to panic other than cortisol, I guess. But I think that's what kind of shows a little bit better, you know, what Holden is dealing with when you see him panic. But we haven't seen that.
Yeah. There's one change, although I don't think we see it down the road, so I think the change sticks, is we don't get bearded Holden, you know, because one of my favorite lines from the book was somebody was looking at, I think it was Avasarala looking at a picture of him and says, what happened to his face? And he grew a beard.
Oh, right, because he's trying to like
come in well.
Disguise himself on Ganymede or whatever. Yeah.
But
okay, so I don't know if we've like had more we wanted to say on theme because we went like afield. So was there anything more we wanted to say on theme?
I'm good.
It was pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah, I mean, trust was just like there with a big old capital T.
Yeah,
I mean,
deception. You know,
yeah, trust and deception. They're two sides. You know, thematically, they're two sides of the same coin. So you know, and. There was deception, you know, on Anderson Dawes' part, that's for sure.
Quite a lot of deception all around, yeah.
And he talked little Diago Harari into being his puppet now. So I'm not gonna. I can't use puppet as a derogatory. It will upset my puppet friends. So
it's true. You should be sensitive to your puppet friends.
Yes, it makes him a little marionette. There, it's not the same. It's close, but it's not the same.
Okay.
So I don't have anything else thematically. Did you, Max?
No.
Any other notes that you wanted to bring up? Let me double check my notes here. I am curious who on the Rossi's crew came up with the idea of helping pass out emergency supplies. I figure it's got to be Alex or Naomi.
Yep. Well, I mean, I guess Holden could have come up with it too. I don't know.
It really seems like to me that would have been an Alex or Naomi idea. It's like, you know what we should do? We should help give out supplies to all these refugees.
Yeah, I mean, I could see either of them doing that. I mean, Naomi's kind of obvious too, because of course they're giving things to belters, and you know that's, you know, but she would think of that. Yeah. But Alex, I could see him thinking of that too.
That's Alex's nature. That's one of the things I love about Alex. You know, is he's a caregiver. You know, he's not your typical fighter jock. You know, he's just a regular old pilot. So he doesn't have nearly the cocky attitude that pilots tend to have on shows and in movies.
That is true. Yeah.
You know, speaking of the supplies, it seems to me that Dawes predicted Trump throwing the paper towels.
Yes, that came
by about a year.
Yeah.
I thought about that too when I saw that.
I looked at the dates. It's about a year apart.
Nice.
Maybe Donnie watched The Expanse.
No chance.
Yeah.
I mean, who
Maybe
did
he
it
saw
better?
that scene.
Dawes.
Dawes did it better.
He did do it a lot
Yeah.
better.
Probably throwing
Not
useful
saying much.
supplies, not paper towels. But yeah, that did.
Here, go dry up the flood with this pack of paper towels. Anyway,
Here, stop that air leak. That paper towels.
here's some chewing gum. Go plug that air leak. It's the same idea.
All right. I brought up how Dawes can compliment you and insult someone in the same breath.
Mhm.
Because he was doing that to Holden and Fred.
And Fred, yeah.
Yeah, I got all of my notes. We covered all of my notes now. So I think that's a wrap for tonight, you guys.
I think so.
Thank you guys for joining tonight. Thank you guys at home for watching. Next week, we will be covering what episode, Max?
Episode 8, Pyre.
Pyre. See you guys next week. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.